Thank you for joining us today's webinar. My name is Jess, and I'm the manager of HR team at Page Personnel, covering entry to middle level hiring. I've been in the recruitment industry for over 6 years, and I'm very happy to be the host for today's webinar and have Gary Lowe to be our presenter today. This is actually the second time we partner with Gary, given the feedback from our first webinar was absolutely fantastic. Hope all of you will enjoy today's webinar as well. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Please note that your mic and video functions have been disabled. You do not need to adjust anything or any of your settings. You will still be able to interact with the panelists during the webinar with 3 buttons at the bottom of your screen. There is a chat function. If you have any concerns or technical issues during the webinar, drop us a private message with the chat icon. Our marketing team will be monitoring this for you. There is also a hand icon which allows you to virtually raise your hand. Again, you can do this if you need to speak with the marketing team during the webinar. Our supporting team will be privately messaging you. We have a Q&A section today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. I will be selecting some questions for Gary to answer. And at the end of the presentation, please hang in for another 2 to 3 minutes. We have a quick survey for all of you to ensure every time we host informative webinars for you. We also have a polling session today to make the session more interactive. So for now, how about we start with a question here? Our question is, what makes you sign up for the webinar about storytelling? There are 4 options for you. The first one is you want to encourage and motivate your employees or team members through better storytelling. The second one is you want to make changes to the culture of the organization. The third one is you want to communicate with your supervisors or senior management more efficiently. And the fourth one is you want to improve on client-facing skills or do better presentation through better storytelling. So while everyone is sharing with us your motivations here, just let me share with you all why I've come up with this idea of storytelling. So I've been speaking with quite a lot of HR professionals every day, and some of them have shared with me their struggles about, their communication with top management, given the fact that they know there is a need to execute different projects on, say, for example, employee experience or drive a learning culture or make change management plans. But it's actually quite hard to get the support from senior management or from the boss. So it's not easy to execute projects, even they have got excellent ideas for the business. I was thinking perhaps it's a good idea to talk about storytelling this time. So looking at the polling session, I think quite a lot of you guys have shared with us your ideas here. So far I've seen quite evenly distributed voting. I've got 53% that they wanted to encourage and motivate your employees and people through better storytelling. So let me just share with you all the results here. Well, so far we've got 52% of participants that they want to encourage and motivate the employees through storytelling, and also they wanted to communicate better with the supervisor or senior management more efficiently. Interesting results. Looks like quite of you guys are here to have, to want to change the culture or do better communication with internal people. Interesting result. So after our polling session today, let's move on to talk about our speaker. So Gary is actually the managing director and principal instructor of Law Consulting. He spent most of his career at Fortune 500 companies like LVMH, Apple, Unilever, with Greater China and APAC region coverage. He was actually the former head of marketing and admission for HKUST MBA programs, and now he serves as a guest lecturer and career coach for top universities as well. As an executive coach for various top-tier MNCs, one of his expertise for corporate training is storytelling. So today he will share with us his view on how storytelling can equip HR to make influence to top management and leaders, change the dynamic of workforce, and make changes to the organization. Without further ado, I will now turn the time over to Gary.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jess. So good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you, meet you all in this nice Thursday morning. I hope you guys are being comfortable, staying either at your home or going back to the office. We know there are a lot of change happening, but most importantly, staying safe. Okay, so very happy to have a very healthy crowd this morning about this topic. So I just wonder, like in your career, I don't know, for most of you guys, have you taken any courses about presentation skills? I always try to ask this question when I begin a storytelling session because if I reflect back on my career, like I've been working in the corporate for like 15 plus years, but honestly, even as a marketing person, coming from different MNC backgrounds, I never took one single presentation skills course ever, like in my career. And now when I'm teaching this and I think back, I feel like, oh, okay, that's pretty strange because arguably, if there's one skill that is common amongst like everyone in the organization to kind of really help to facilitate our work and everything, maybe this should be the topic. Okay, but anyway, I'm glad that you guys are here. Today, we're gonna have a very nice, sweet and short session around 40 to 45 minutes, which I would hope to cover some important things and essentials about how we should do storytelling in our corporate setting. And very great, just saw Jess's polling just now. Awesome. So I see some people, again, really want to motivate your team. Obviously, this is an issue they are all facing right now. And the second one about convincing your boss. Okay. I do have quite a lot of experience doing that as well. So hopefully, I think what we're going to be talking about today should be all good. And hopefully after the session, you would have some new ideas in terms of how to craft your content. Okay. So now let me just get this started. Okay, topic for today, influence your organization through storytelling. So Jess already made a great self-introduction, so I'm not gonna repeat that. So just quickly, my background, I was always from marketing, worked at different MNCs. So I would say in a way, storytelling was kind of what I live by. It's kind of my career because constantly I'm doing different presentations. So I think the more interesting thing today is because I'm sure you guys have gone through a lot of different training. So personally, I'm not a professor teaching these things. So I really kind of gone through this myself in the corporate life. So hopefully you would find everything that I shared today a little bit more practical. And again, chances are you would not be able to find this on Google because these are all the knowledge that I have accumulated myself through my own career and also now through a lot of teaching. So basically now as a corporate trainer, I cover quite a range of different topics. Storytelling is my core one. I also talk about personal selling, influencing, negotiation, leadership, different topics. The interesting thing is because my focus soft skills, I do work with quite a lot of different clients across different industries. So I know that today, just kind of quickly gave me to kind of have a look in terms of the list. And I know we also have friends from a wide range of industries. So don't worry, I'm sure for everything that we'll be sharing today, no matter what kind of function or industry you're from, you should be able to find some value here. Okay, so let's get to the topic. What is storytelling? Okay, so this is a pretty interesting question that I like to ask when we're doing these face-to-face sessions. So what is storytelling for you? Like a lot of people would be telling me, well, Gary, is storytelling just talking about some of my personal experience, blah, blah. So I think there are a lot of different perceptions out there in terms of what storytelling is about. So in my point of view, I would say, number one, storytelling is not about making things sound fancy. Because, you know, sometimes in a corporate setting, maybe you got the same feedback from your managers. They said, hey, don't present it like this. You should present it as a story. Then maybe your first perception is, but okay, I don't want to make things sound fancy. I don't want to kind of sugarcoat any messages, or I don't even want to exaggerate anything. So hopefully after this short session today, I do want to let you know storytelling is not about all these things, but really it's all about this. It boils down to this sentence. It's about providing the right content, right content in a certain right sequence Why are we doing this? Because we want to create value for our message, which eventually is to be able to provide an impact. So think about this. I think we do quite a lot of PowerPoint presentations or emails or face-to-face presentations every day. What is our goal? Are we really making an impact through our message? Or are we just, oh, okay, today I need to present, I'm gonna present this. Okay, this is gonna be really core. So whatever I talk about today, I think the intention is really important. Why do we want to do storytelling well is exactly as what we've seen in the poll, because we want to better motivate our team, because we want to better influence our bosses, our managers, so we could get more resources to do good stuff. So again, very important. It's actually a very fundamental skills when it comes to influencing. Okay, so you might say, hey, Gary, but I do a lot of presentations every day. So what is special about storytelling? So again, some very simple, very basic differentiations. Number one, when you come up with a presentation, do you start from the what or do you start from the who? What I mean by that is, okay, think about this scenario. So for example, maybe yesterday you just had a meeting with your supervisor. They said, hey, Gary, you need to kind of come up with a presentation. We need to do this and that. So what is the first thing that you think about? Do you think about, okay, so if that's the case, what should I put in this presentation? Which normally, back to my early days in corporate, what I would do is just open a previous PowerPoint, which is kind of relevant to the topic, press save as, change a name, pick another few PowerPoints, and then just kind of copy and paste, select, add a few, try to make some sense out of those random slides. And okay, now I got 40 to 50 slides. It should be good to go because at least I've shown my manager that I've done some work. So I would say, I don't know if that sounds familiar, but that is usually what happens in the real world, which I would say, because a lot of things that I'll be talking about today is how to leverage on some skills that they use in films, cinemas, or dramas, how to bring those engaging elements back to our business storytelling setting. And obviously you could imagine if you're a director, you're just randomly choosing a few different films and then just try to kind of put some scenes together, try to make some sense and kind of create a story. That actually never happens. So hopefully that also explains why most of the time when we go into a presentation, we are not as engaged because they just look like random information. I don't know if you kind of gone through the same. Sometimes I have colleagues just showing me the slide and say, well, guys, look at this slide. And then they are taking time to kind of digest what that slide is about. And they're going to tell you, well, actually, I don't think this is relevant for you. So let's go to the next slide. So then my question is, if that's the case, then why are you putting that slide there in the first place? I think a lot of times this is very fundamental, but we have not spent enough time just to edit our PowerPoints according to our audiences. So for every good story, you always start from the who. So the question you should be asking is, okay, tomorrow, who would I be presenting to? Okay, for these audiences, what are they most concerned about? Okay, very important, because for every audience, if you want them to listen to you, you want to make sure at the first opening of your presentation, you tell them that I understand your concerns. So for example, if today I'm making a presentation to my top management, which you have a lot of say, but you understand they're most concerned about P&L, I would always begin with, okay, today, I know that a lot of you are very concerned about the P&L projections, and I know we want to have more discussion about that. But since today we have a big team, I might want to cover the overall background about the whole project first, and we will talk about the P&L on the fourth part. So to make sure that we have enough time to discuss, I would also make sure this presentation is going to be within 30 minutes. Then I'll leave 30 minutes just to answer your questions if you have any. So you could imagine if you were the audience, maybe you still feel a little bit impatient about, okay, talk about what I'm interested in. But at least I think they would be a little bit more patient just by setting that scene. So again, let people know that I know what you are concerned about. That is very, very important as an opening. So besides what they need to know, also make sure you take out things that they do not need to know. Because I would say, if you think about a movie, why a movie is usually cooler than a drama, because it's short, it's compact, it includes all the content that excites you. So a lot of times when you have a PowerPoint slide, like around 40 to 50 slides, maybe it's not, you don't have the right content, but maybe the right content only exists in around 10 to 20 of the slides. And it is the rest of the slides that actually bore people out. So can you imagine going to a movie? Oh yeah, I love the Avengers movie, which is 2 hours. But what happens if they show you a 5-hour unedited version? All of a sudden, you will feel totally different about the movie, and that's what happens with PowerPoints. So one very simple exercise that I would recommend you to do if you're really serious about this is, okay, let's say if tomorrow you need to make a presentation. What I would like to ask you to do is later today, maybe after this session, just pull out that PowerPoint again. And when you look at this PowerPoint again, I want you to kind of completely get to your audience's perspective to view the slides. So for example, if I'm presenting to my supervisor, I would get into his or her mode, including your body language and everything, and just go through slide by slide. In every single slide, try to ask yourself, so what? From that person's point of view, so what? And the second thing, what is your impression after you see that slide? Do you see them put in hard work, or do you see, oh, this is irrelevant? Whatever that is, I would say if on every single slide you're able to answer the so what question from the audience's point of view, chances are you should have a pretty good presentation. If not, chances are you might be thinking about, okay, why am I putting this content there in the first place? So for every engaging story, of course, it has to be customized, but the key is it always starts from the audiences. What are they most concerned about? And the other thing, what are they not concerned about? Okay, less is more. Second thing, what is your objective when you go into this presentation? Like a lot of people, including myself when I was younger, just because my boss asked me to present, then I'll just present. I never thought about what I want to tell the audience. So now think about a movie. If you're a director, how would you start plan a movie? Obviously, you're not just going to try to write some script, blah, blah, blah. And then after the whole script, try to kind of make some sense out of it and think about, okay, so what is the core message of the movie? How should you start? You always start with the reverse, right? Start from what is the core message you want to bring out. So today, for this presentation, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to influence someone so they feel or believe something differently about the topic that you're sharing? Do you want to impress someone just to let them know how much hard work you guys have gone through to kind of get more resources in the future? Do you want to just get some input? Okay, I just want to give you all the background so I make sure that you guys could give me some suggestions. Or do you want to get some buy-in? Okay, so now I need to think about what are the things you're most concerned about? How can I get your buy-in after this 30 or 40-minute presentation? So I would say always start from a very, very clear goal, because for the best stories, technically, every single slide should be building towards that conclusion. So if you want to tell your boss, oh, things are going very bad, so we need to change, you need to make sure how you set the context is things are going bad. If you just become like very objective and yeah, some things are good, some things are bad, sometimes your storyline will look a little bit funky in that sense. So I just want to say one thing. Is a story neutral or is a story biased? Okay, I hate to say this, but every story is biased. But don't worry, right? Because our CEOs tell stories, presidents tell stories, politicians tell stories. It's okay. We are not alternating the facts. We're not telling a lie, whatever. But again, we just want to be very focused. What is our core message and how do we build the storyline to kind of push to that conclusion? It is a journey, holding hands with your audience to walk through a journey and come to the same conclusion. So obviously, if you think about a lot of PowerPoints, there's no storyline, because I would say for every single slide, you should be able to distill it down to one core message. So here's my question. If you think about every single slide, go back and try to do this exercise. If every single slide boils down to one core message, try to connect all those single sentences together and try to read it out. Is there a logic behind? Chances are, no. So that's why when people sit in your presentation, they feel like, whoa, I'm just listening to random information. Technically, every core message on a slide, when they connect together, it should sound like a logical paragraph. Okay, so hopefully this kind of sets the foundation to think about, again, why storytelling is important and how do we kind of make this work. Okay. So we're going to be going with a quicker pace today because we don't have a lot of time, but I also want to make sure I share something valuable for you. So let's just kind of move on to this, hopefully very practical and effective 6-step storytelling framework, which I have been teaching a lot in different corporates. So, okay, to make this simple, I hope you guys all remember this after the session. Every story looks like this, exactly like this. So what is this about? Number one, where do you begin with? You don't begin with the background. You don't begin with once upon a time. You should actually begin with the book cover, which is you need to tell people why you need to be here and what would you get out of the session. Okay, I hope you understand what I mean, because a lot of people just go in a presentation and say, today we're going to talk about Project X. Okay, this is the background Project X. And then people sitting there are kind of, hey, wait a second, but why do I need to listen into Project X? And what do you want from me? Do you want to just tell me something, or do you want to ask me for some input? So be always clear about your objective in terms of what you want to achieve out of this meeting. Okay, today I want to give you some background so I could get some input from you. Okay, today I want to share with you my plan. So to make sure if you're okay, we could get your kind of approval, then we can move on. So let people know, because based on different objectives, people would obviously observe or interpret your information differently, right? For example, if I'm management, if you just want to tell me something FYI, maybe I'm not going to ask that many questions. But maybe if now you need an approval from me, obviously I would be asking more questions, which I am concerned about. So this skill, you could use it either in a PowerPoint, even email, or face-to-face presentations. Always tell the audience first, what is it in for me? Okay, what would I get out of this session after this? Maybe just one clear sentence, that's good enough to give them a why they need to sit in your session. So the second thing, okay, obviously now for a story, you need to start with once upon a time. Okay, so that's good. You could talk about all the backgrounds, but again, as I mentioned, you don't put out random scenes of the background, because basically all your backgrounds is slowly helping you to build to that conclusion eventually. So two things to think about your background. Number one, for every background you're talking about, is it leading the audience towards a certain conclusion that you want to convey? Number one. Number two, are you putting some irrelevant content in the background? Which a lot of people do. They just put up different charts for no reason. And then people are kind of like, hey, now you're talking here, now you're talking here, now you're talking here. There isn't a storyline right there. So I would say just a very simple example is what I call information mapping. Is start from the big picture and then slowly zoom it down. So for example, if now I were still working at Apple, I want to tell you about the iPhone sales. What I'm not going to do is just start from, okay, iPhone sales, this is how it's working. Again, there are not a lot of insights there. Maybe what I'm going to say is, okay, the overall smartphone market has been growing for 5% in the past 5 years. Great. Okay, that's the bigger picture. And then what? So within the smartphone market, what is leading the growth is actually the premium sector. Then of course, you could imagine I show a graph that premium sector is growing, the mass sector is not growing. So within the premium sector, who is growing? There is Apple, there is Samsung, there is Huawei. Okay, so Apple is leading the growth, for example. Okay, so then the logical question is, if Apple is growing, then what kind of models are growing? Yeah, the next thing is actually iPhone 11 is growing. Then what is going to be your next question? Okay, so under iPhone 11, which SKU, which country, which city? So if you understand what I'm talking about is the background isn't just random information. There is a sequence, which is almost like when you click into your desktop, right? You open one file and you see 3 files. Then you open one file, then you see 3 files. So there is actually a storyline which is connecting what you're talking about. Okay, so think about your background. Is it leading people from the bigger picture towards something that you want to convey at the end of your presentation? Okay, third part, very, very interesting, which I would call it the plot of the story, which is also something that I always see people miss out. Okay, let me ask you this. For every story, it is about a hero journey. So if you want to create a hero, what is the most important thing? Let me tell you this one secret for all Hollywood movies and effective communication. If you don't have a bad guy, there is no good guys. Again, if there's not a bad guy, there are no good guys. So please remember this line, okay? If you don't remember anything else out of this session, this is the most important. If you cannot sell the problem, you cannot sell the solution. Okay, let me repeat this. If you cannot sell the problem, you cannot sell the solution. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if any one of you here are fans of Marvel superhero movies. So for example, now for whatever reason, they will be launching a new Avengers movie. Okay, let me tell you about the storyline. It's kind of like this. So somehow Iron Man was still around. So they have Hulk, they have Captain America. What happened is these 3 guys, they went to Las Vegas, had a great time, won some money, had a buffet at Caesar Palace, had a great time, went back to California, got married, have kids, they all went to great universities, life is good. So is that a movie? Obviously you see, okay, there's something not right there, is because exactly every movie, in order to highlight the good guy, you always need to have a bad guy. So here is my question for you. In your presentation right now, yes, I'm sure you might be trying to convince someone with your solution, but have you told people about the problem first? Because guess what? Do you think people connect with problems or people connect with solutions better? I'll tell you the fact. People connect with problems better. So for example, now back to some of you guys who mentioned, okay, I want to do this more for motivating my staff. What do you think your staff would want to hear from you? You want to start from, oh, okay, today we have 3 company initiatives to kind of help you navigate this kind of COVID situation. Chances are no. What they want to hear is, now it is a tough time for every single one of us. Not only just our company, but for the overall industry, but also for all our affiliates globally. So we understand the pandemic has been around for some time. I know it has caused a lot of challenges for everyone. Just like yesterday, I've seen a lot of you guys actually, though you're working from home, I still see a lot of late emails because I know that you're putting a lot of effort just to be agile and then kind of shifting around and be flexible about this situation. I understand that's painful, and I am going through the same as well. And honestly, there's not a lot we could do about it. We could just focus on what could work at the moment. So I want you to just kind of get a feel about what I was talking about. One thing is, I was only talking about common pain points. So chances are when you were listening in, you might say, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's wasting us a lot of time. There are a lot of changes. So people tend to actually agree with problems. So if they cannot agree with the problem that you're talking about, there is not a big chance they would agree with your solution. Okay? This is really, really important. So make sure now, if you go and review your PowerPoints or your email, whatever that is, do check again. Number 1, is there enough content that you put in just to tell people what is the problem? Okay, you need to build a problem to build a sense of urgency so people want to change. If they don't feel like there's a problem, no one would want to change. So of course, you might say at some times, well, things are going well, I don't have any problems. Well, good for you. You could also talk about the opportunity. So no matter what that is if you want to sell something, your proposal, make sure you set a platform for it. That platform could be an issue, could be an opportunity. Whatever that is, then so this makes sense. Because for every story, eventually it's all about the question, why? Why are we doing this? If we're able to properly build a problem, then the why is going to be very clear. Okay, so I hope this point gets through. So the next thing is now, okay, you might have an issue, then some people would try to jump to the solution, which, well, could work, but sometimes you realize your management, okay, back to a lot of concerns from you guys, your management might be challenging you. Okay, Gary, I do agree with your problem, but why are you choosing this way to do things? Why not other ways? So you understand, for most of your audiences, honestly, they don't know what is the best solution. They just want to sit there to kind of judge and criticize to make sure that you have got the best out of the box. Okay, that is their thing. So now, one thing in storytelling very important is expect rejections. If you know that they already have the tendency to kind of reject or criticize ideas, why don't I do it on behalf of them? Okay, so now, this is this issue in front of us, which we could all agree. And honestly, many times your management would already be telling you what are the core issues we're fixing. So sometimes we're just repeating what they're talking about, but actually that's what makes them trust you. So, okay, this is the issue. Then there are a few solutions. Okay, we might go for solution A, B, or C. According to the company priorities right now, we have analyzed the different options. So A, blah, blah, B, blah, blah, C, blah, blah. So after analyzing and also kind of carefully weighting the pros and cons, we believe B should be the best option. So this process, again, I see a lot of people missing out, but that is actually very, very critical. Because if you could share the thinking process, throughout that time, what you're doing is completely get into the audience's point of view, because guess what? they would also be evaluating the solutions at the same time when you're talking about it. So when you start to talk about how you analyze solutions, they might start get connected and feel like, yeah, okay, these are the options, I agree. Yeah, this one isn't good. Yeah, I agree with your point. So actually what you're doing is building that agreement momentum. And the second thing is, if you want to impress someone about something, sharing the thinking process is very, very important. Because if they do not know all the struggles that you have gone through, even if you have the practically best solution, it's not as impressive. Okay, trust me, because myself, from the luxury industry, what is a luxury story about? It is all about all the hard work of the craftsmanship that people gone through. Oh, Mr. Alexander, blah, blah, blah. And then, they have gone through like 50 years of testing different things. And then they came up with this final solution, okay, which is the best cognac out there. It's all about these things. So tell people the hardship or all the thinking you've gone through. Even if you come up with the same solution, people would be much more impressed. Okay, thinking process. So of course, after you share about thinking process, good, then talk about what you're gonna do, which you would do anyway. But again, I want you to really carefully review all these things, because though they look very simple, a lot of people really miss all these stuff. They don't talk about the objective to begin with. The background, they just give you random information. For the issue, they don't talk about the issue. They just kind of jump into what I want to propose. And of course, they don't talk about the thinking process because they don't talk about the issue. So again, you could talk about the action for sure, but make sure you also talk about the expected impact, which is related to your audience's KPI. Again, everyone sitting there, the first question they're asking is, why am I sitting here? What's in it for me? So unless you tell them something that's related to their KPI, chances are they won't be as engaged. So that's why you understand, for a lot of you, if you're finding difficulty to kind of convince your manager or supervisors, because think about it, what do they care about? What are they concerned about? Obviously, it has to be the numbers, about the P&L. So if now you have a solution coming up and then you don't talk about P&L, they're kind of like, well, honestly, I don't even know how to judge whether this is good or bad. It sounds like a good concept, but what is the actual impact that I care? Okay, so I just want to give an example, because I know today we might have quite a few friends who come from the HR professional, and they might say, hey, Gary, like, I love this story framework, but now I'm just running a program to just kind of maybe simplify part of the process or motivate the team. I don't know how to translate that into numbers. Then I will say, try your best to make an estimate. So for example, if you're now running this system to just kind of simplify process, which you feel like would be saving 100 hours, man hours per month, then what I would do is estimate what is the average per hour cost for your staff, and then times 100. So what you could say is not just, okay, we have a great program. We're gonna say this program, if we could save up to 100 like man hours, potentially it's gonna save us $2 million annually. And again, we're only investing maybe 300,000. So all of a sudden you're talking about the P&L language, and then your manager maybe, they start to connect. Okay, this could potentially create a 2 million impact. So of course, eventually, are you able to really quantify that number? We understand it's difficult, but at least you need to kind of use the right language to connect with the right audience. They like to talk about numbers. Find a way to kind of convert it into numbers as much as you can. Because to be really honest, if you want to kind of take a new initiative, which you can't even translate it to any kind of potential or expected numbers, chances are it's really difficult for the other party to say go or not go. Okay, so we also want to show a little bit more empathy from the other party's point of view. My thinking is, I know that whenever I tell a story to them, they need to tell us another story to people above them. So how would I craft the story first to make sure that when they need to present to people above them, it's gonna be easier for them? Okay, so find a way to help them convince people around them. I think that's the key message. So then obviously, if you talk about action, always talk about next step, right? Just like any drama, any movie, it's all about, okay, stay tuned, what's coming up next? Of course, if there's something you need them to do, be very clear about what you want them to do. If this is a group of management, you don't need them to do anything, fine, but tell them what's coming up. Okay, so today, after presenting all this, if you feel like it's all good, we're gonna move on to kind of work on the different things. And 3 months later, we will hold another management meeting to keep you guys updated about the progress. So there's always something to look forward to in every kind of story. Okay. Hope it's simple enough, easy to remember, and also kind of could relate to what you're doing right now. Let me just kind of give you two quick examples. So one, obviously, I think Steve Jobs as one of the best storytellers, I think, in modern world in terms of telling business stories. I just want to say for my time working at Apple, I obviously learned a lot in terms of storytelling. And for every Apple presentation, I would say, of course, the better ones back in the Steve Jobs days, he was actually using exactly the same framework. And I want to show you how it works. So of course, if today he was launching the iPhone, the first thing, he's just not going to talk about the background of Apple, what kind of company we are, right? Be clear cut. What do we want to talk about today? Today, we are launching a revolutionary phone called the iPhone. So now you're generating curiosity and excitement amongst the audience. So second step, what is the background? What he's going to do is just analyze a little bit, okay, what's happening in the market? What are the other competitors? What's happening? Then the third thing, as I mentioned, build the villain. So he needs to explain why the iPhone looks like that, because of course, it looks very normal for us today, but back in those days, it's actually very innovative. So what he talked about is, okay, BlackBerry. I don't know what age group you come from, but for my age group, like having a BlackBerry back in those days was actually a privilege. Then he was saying, okay, actually the problem of BlackBerry is the part that we love the most. It is the keyboard. Because he said that the keyboard is there no matter you want it or not. So it does not provide the flexibility that we're enjoying today in terms of having different interfaces. So when you hear about that, oh, okay, you would say, oh, that makes sense. I never thought about that. Then of course, he's not just going to directly jump into the iPhone, but talk about what were his thinkings. So he talked about how he leveraged ideas from the mouse, the click wheel from an iPod, and also this kind of new multi-touch things to let us know how amazing the development process was. Then of course, he's always going to talk about how things put into action. So he uses an iPhone to call different numbers, try to order some coffee, just to show us how amazing the device is. Then of course, obviously after all this, he just says, okay, next step, this is when it's going to be launched. So again, no drama, no rocket science, as simple as that. But if you're able to really grasp this idea, it could be very powerful in different settings. So just to refresh everyone a little bit, I would also add a little bit concept here about building context quickly. So number one, if you are asking for budget, which again ties into our earlier poll in terms of you want to convince your boss a little more, how could I make my story a little bit more convincing? Add some context to it. Okay, now you might be asking for $5 million. Does that make sense? I don't know how to judge. Judging always starts with comparison. So hopefully you will be able to gather some data like in the industry, all key players are spending 10 million plus, then 5 million sounds okay. How is it compared to previous? Okay, 5 million might sound a lot for people who don't have the background, but if you tell people last year we were actually spending 5 million as well, and we're kind of maintaining the budget control, then again, that might sound a little bit more affordable. Third thing, what is the total percentage of total spend? For people, again, not in your background, 5 million might sound a lot, but if you tell them this is actually only, 5% of our annual spend, then it sounds smaller. Third thing, okay, now you might be investing something either in a new system, in a new program, which takes a lot of short-term investment right now. So the question is, if that sounds like a lot of money, because people would ask you about the return. If you talk about the same year return, it's hard to justify. So try to kind of put it out a little bit longer, just like what most CEOs would do to justify their plans. Okay, yeah, the first year we're going to put in more, but guess what? The cost is going to go down as time goes by and the return is going to go up. So if you look into a 3 to 5 years time span, this is going to be the return on investment. Again, people would feel very differently about the same content just by adding all these context. Okay, you might be asking for approval. Number one, tell people what is the positive impact. As I mentioned, always talk about something that could relate to their KPI. So what is going to be the KPI for this group of people? Make sure you talk about something that hits those KPI. But again, I would say nowadays you might realize one thing, talking about positive things is one thing, but another very effective tactic is talk about negative things, okay? Fear sells. We all understand this. So maybe if you want to create a sense of urgency for your management to do something, besides telling them what are the good sides of this, you could also tell them, if we don't do this, what's gonna happen as a consequence. So that's why I love to share competitor data, because that looks pretty passive in a sense, which I'm not shoving information into your face, but okay, I'm telling you competition is doing all these stuff. You're already implying if we don't catch up, we will be losing and we will be lagging behind. Okay, that's very important to just kind of trigger their heart to compete and be better. That is the responsibility as a good storyteller. And of course, okay, you've been talking about all these things. I'm not sure if it works. Then tell me, are there some successful case studies, either from your competitors, from your other global offices, from other industries, whatever it is, prove it to them. If you told me it's gonna work, then I'm sure it has worked somewhere already. Tell them the concept. And sometimes it's gonna be hard to get approval because managers, in their point of view, they feel like, oh, okay, if we're gonna do this every single time or every single month, that's gonna cost a lot or there's gonna be a lot of risk. So do make sure you tell them, if this is a once-off thing, you would tell them, yes, it might be a little bit more painful to do this at first, but it's gonna be a once-off thing. And after we do this, things will be much better afterwards. Okay, one good proposition for selling. Finally, if you want to impress someone about something, which is very important to gain more resources in an organization, of course, you have to tell them how challenging things were, okay? If you never told them what are the challenges or hardship you've gone through, this is not gonna be that impressive. So from a story building point of view, don't you realize for every story, they first start to build up how bad that villain is, how tough it is to beat, to make you feel the contrast, which the hero is super impressive. So same for you. If you want to talk about some results, don't just go ahead and say, oh yeah, last month we achieved this. First, talk about what are the challenges you have gone through and potentially what are some of the hiccup or barriers and how you've gone through that, because it is that process which impresses people. And again, are there any further complications? This is one technique that movies love to use is, okay, now I'm the good guy. I'm being chased by the bad guy already. I trip over and then all of a sudden it starts to rain and then a taxi just kind of comes and almost runs over me. It always happened, right? So nowadays, unfortunately, given the current situation, I'm sure you have quite a lot of this to talk about. Oh yeah, this is happening. It's already bad. But again, plus this, this is super bad. So if you could build the story to a very low point, there is a good chance that you could kind of go back up. And that's exactly the plot. That contrast is the plot of your business story. Thinking process behind your solution. As I mentioned, if you want to impress people, don't just tell people what you're doing, tell people what you decided not to do. Okay, that is very important to let people know you have thought through everything. And wow, what a smart genius. You have thought through all these kind of options. Very, very important. Finally, if you're telling me it's good, how good is it? Okay, could you compare it with other competitors or industry players just to contrast that? Okay, so this is all about context. Just briefly to let you know, if you want to make the flower look very pretty, you need to add a little bit of grass behind just to highlight your message. Okay, so I'm about to kind of conclude this. So just coming back to the 6-step storytelling framework as an example. So again, I know that today we have quite a lot of friends from the HR professional. So I'll try to kind of make an example right there. For example, today you have a new talent management program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my manager and say, okay, today I want to discuss with you about a new talent management program. Want to get some of your input so we could move forward. Again, very clear. I want your input. I want to tell you my thoughts. Then, of course, talk about the background. So what is going to be the background in this context? Obviously, I want to know, okay, you want to launch something new. So what's happening right now? Oh yeah, these are the current programs. We have 3 sectors, blah, blah. These for general employees, these for management team. And so far, these are some of the feedback. So of course, if you want to build something new, chances are the current things are not working as well, right? If everything is working well, then why would you need something new? So then, of course, you are building slowly towards that you identified a gap. Okay, we looked at all these kind of different programs. They're pretty good, but there is a key gap here, which is something we find from our audience feedback. So, okay, these are the key issues. Okay, so let's say if this was the key issue, okay, we're not able to engage senior management, then obviously talk about what are the options that you have gone through. Okay, yeah, if senior management is not engaging as well for these programs, there are a few things we could think about. I don't know, like e-learning, kind of shifting different programs, inviting different instructors, try to find some in-house or kind of external consultants to help out. These are all the options. And then we have evaluated all the pros and cons. and eventually decided, okay, this should be our priority. Okay, based on everything that we're dealing with now, this is the action. And if we're going to do this, what is going to be the impact? And again, try our best to quantify this. Okay, if we're going to do this, maybe we're going to increase our retention rate, we're going to increase employee feedback, blah blah, and then okay, this would be very helpful for succession planning. So if you agree with all these things, this is going to be the next step. Okay, so again, I think it doesn't matter whether you're coming from HR or not. The same story framework, I would say, apply in all different settings. The key is, I would say, of course, every good story is customized. So if your supervisor is already very clear about the background, the issue, and the thinking, blah, blah, of course, you could skip that. But I would say, in my experience, the thing that doesn't change is the logical sequence right here. Why sometimes things are easier to memorize is because if there's a logical sequence, then it's easy to memorize, just like movies. So what you want to do is make sure that you have that sequence in place so people know what you're talking about. I will say the ultimate test is, even if today you're making a 45-minute to 1 hour presentation, now, when people leave the room after your session, if you just ask them, can you conclude today's session in 30 seconds? Think about what they would say. If you could already imagine what they would say in that 30-second version, there is a very good chance you have a good story, because that exactly works like the trailer. One final thing before I wrap this up is, if some of you are still thinking about this model, and okay, some of you might be thinking, oh, okay, that looks pretty logical. I would tell you, this is exactly the same storyline that maybe 90% of Hollywood movie uses. I'll show you. You might have watched the movie Lion King, right? What happens in Lion King? First of all, the objective. Okay, Lion King is talking about the circle of life. You kind of have a sense what this movie is about. Then what is the background? You still remember? It starts with saying the circle of life, just giving you the context. This is a big animal kingdom. This is Mufasa, this is Simba, all these kind of different characters. Then what happens? The first scene is they went to the elephant graveyard. Okay, almost got into problems. And then later, obviously something happened to Mufasa. Didn't go well. So the bad guy, Scar, came up. Then what happened? Okay, Simba gone through a long thinking process just to struggle to try to kind of break through all these items. And eventually, yes, he became the hero, having the final fight at the Lion Rock to, yes, beat our enemy. Then guess what? The next thing is Simba also has a son. Things move on, and things at the end are always better versus where we started with. Sounds familiar? Exactly. Okay, maybe tomorrow you could start to kind of put together a Hollywood movie. Okay, so hope this was helpful. Just to kind of conclude for today's session before I get into some question and answers is, every good story begins with the audience. Just now, because we have limited time, I started from a pretty, I would say, framework kind of thing, which works sometimes, I would say most of the times, but of course, for some more complicated stories, you might need to adjust a little bit, but always start from the who, not from the what. Second thing, always start with your purpose. Start with the end in your mind. Before thinking about the content, think about what impact you want to bring in your story right now. And then just kind of do the research, do the reverse, start from the very end and think about what kind of storyline do I need to put together to lead to this conclusion. Final thing, once you have a story, most of the times why we are not so convincing in the presentation is, honestly, we are not convinced ourselves. So make sure we convince ourselves before we're able to convince anyone. So hopefully this gives you a good kind of foundation class for storytelling and why you want to become a storyteller, because a storyteller is an influencer. So, well, yeah, I think we have around 10 minutes left. I do want to make sure we leave enough time just to kind of discuss some of your questions as well. So thank you very much for being with me. Just some kind of contact info here. If you want to stay in touch, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email. So now I would just stop sharing and then hand the time back to Jess.
Thank you, Gary, for such an informative webinar. There are a lot of good examples shared and very impactful, very loud and clear. I love your line. If you can't sell the solution, you can sell the problem. You can't sell the solution. I Love that. Very impactful. Thank you very much for your webinar. So now it is actually the Q&A section. Again, for those who would like to ask questions, feel free to type your question into the question box. So now we have got 3 questions. The first question is from anonymous attendee. I understand the importance to manage the expectation at the beginning of the storytelling, but sometimes top management may feel impatient and interrupt your story. How should we react? What do you think, Gary?
Great question. That's always going to be a challenge. I'll be honest. It doesn't mean if you apply the story framework just now, everything would be solved. But a few things, because I think you mentioned a key point, which is about managing expectations. So think about what impatient means. Impatient means, from an EQ point of view, is because you are not telling me yet what I want to know. So that's why I'm impatient, right? If I'm talking to you, why am I impatient? Because you're not telling me, you don't understand what I'm looking for. You are not telling me what I want to know. So if you understand that's going to be the key point, sometimes maybe it's not just about what happens in the meeting, but pre-meeting expectation management. So for example, if your management is already expecting to hear from the P&L and he or she knows that things will be bad, sometimes I might already just give an executive summary through the email. So at least some of the key points have gone through. And to be honest, if you are kind of worried that they would be upset about those figures, you rather they be upset looking at the email than just hearing this from you firsthand during the meeting and be upset about you. Okay. So sometimes upfront expectation management would be helpful. And I think maybe just one small tip which might help your situation is, again, you need to tell the audience that you understand their feeling. So I might start with, okay, today I know that the situation is going to be quite serious. So I understand you might also have a lot of questions. You might also want to jump into questions. I do understand that. But just in order, I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And maybe some of the content that I was sharing would actually cover some of your questions. If I may, I do want to ask everyone maybe to save your questions to the very last of the presentation, which I will make sure that I save 30 minutes just to answer your questions. Again, I would say, is this going to be a kind of a way that must solve your problem? I'm not sure, because if they're impatient, they might still jump in. But is there going to be a good chance that they might feel a little bit more patient? Maybe yes, just because you told them, I know that you're going to be impatient. I know you want to ask questions, but please do me a favor. Can we kind of consolidate all the questions at the very back? Because I want to make sure that we run this meeting as effective as possible. And of course, I would always get a check-in and create some social pressure that, okay, are we all okay before we start? And if they don't raise a question, I assume it's going to be okay. So hopefully that would mitigate and alleviate the situation a little bit. But of course, if they jump in, that's why you want to be the boss.
Thank you, Gary. Very interesting story to share. I've got another question from another anonymous attendee, which this is a question where a lot of HR or business decision maker might have.
Right.
So he or she asks, do you recommend storytelling as a tool to deliver bad news? Or should we deliver bad news more directly, like ripping a band-aid off for a termination or business decision that might affect the employee quite negatively? What do you think, Gary?
Wow, I love this crowd, right? Really sharp questions. This is a tricky one. So obviously, if now you're delivering bad news, maybe what I talked about is not going to directly apply, though obviously about building the villain, that's going to be something that obviously applies, and talk about the background. I would say it really depends on like the company history, the culture, the style. There's obviously pros and cons by ripping the band-aid or just kind of taking it slow. But I would say one thing I would try to do is manage expectations, because one thing is about like, how do I define happiness? Happiness equals expectations minus perceived reality. Okay, so that means perceived reality is based on how good we're telling the story, but expectation actually dictates a big part in terms of are we happy or not. So for example, now I feel like they're doing a good job just managing our expectations that the COVID situation is not going to improve in the short run. So I think at least in these few days, we feel a little bit, I wouldn't say better, but not as bad, because we're not having that much hope, right? So if I were in your position that you really want to deliver some bad news, what I would try to do is not to kind of, okay, if expectations were here to begin with, okay, I never thought I would get fired or whatever that is. I would start by a management meeting, just telling everyone about the background of what's happening right now in the company, here, regionally, globally, to picture that sense to let you know things are not doing good. Okay. So yeah, there are a lot of layoffs already happening at the global level and also in the industry. I don't know. We also have a 10% layoff rate so far. Okay, so then I'm going to talk about what's going to happen right now is we know this is going to be an issue. So we're carefully looking into the situation, which of course we don't want to kind of take this action, but at this point of time, nothing could be guaranteed. So at least in that setting, people, their expectation would be from here to, oh gosh, I might get fired. So the next time when you come back in, no matter if they really get fired or not, I think at least they're going to feel a little bit better, because if I'm not getting fired, then, oh, God bless, right? If I got fired, well, my expectations are already around there. So it's kind of, well, I was expecting that. So I think just adding this little pre-meeting just to tell you this is what's happening. We'll see what's going to happen and digest this a little bit. I think managing that expectation would be really important, especially when you go into delivering bad news.
Thank you, Gary. That's very useful because I think quite a lot of companies might have been having the situation where they don't know how to deliver bad news, how to handle the difficult situation or conversation. That's very useful. Very thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the third question is, how about the management only give you 5 to 10 minutes for your presentation or so-called a quick note or a presentation? Yep. Or whatever they would say. How would you adjust the storyline? Or you cut any components of the storyline? What do you think?
Again, great question. 5 to 10 minutes, I would say the same framework applies. Always start from objective for sure. Like if now you just kind of bumped into your manager on the kind of during the lane and then say, okay, I want to talk to you about one thing because, okay, what is your objective? Of course, background, if you need to talk about it, if they're really familiar, don't talk about it. But again, the issue for sure, talk about the issue. Because if you don't start from the issue, they don't even know why you're doing this. You're not just going to bump into someone and say, hey, we want to do this tomorrow. Then they're kind of like, what? Why? Right? So the issue could be anything from 2 to 3 lines. It could be short. Okay, now we have an issue. We just had a customer who kind of raised a crisis mode and blah, blah, having all these complaints. Okay, so this is the issue. So yeah, the thinking process, of course, if you don't have enough time, I think that also depends upon your audience, right? Because some bosses, they love to be more judgmental and critical. They love to hear about, have you thought about everything? But there are also some bosses who much be more direct, just tell me what you want to do. But I think either or, you could keep the thinking process or not, but always talk about the issue and then solution, then maybe quickly the next step. So hopefully if you think about the whole framework, yeah, though there might be 6 steps, but just now because I skipped 2 of them, and every single part could be just anything ranging from 15 to 30 seconds, to be honest. But I think, yeah, the logic still applies.
Thank you, Gary. Very useful for those people who have bosses who are really busy, packed with back-to-back meetings all the time. So I think it is almost time for today. Sorry, we can't go through all the questions we have because time is limited. I want to thank Gary again for such an informative and impactful presentation today. So if for those who would like to ask Gary or myself specifically, feel free to contact me or our marketing team. We are more than happy to continue the conversation or discussion with you. Gary, is there anything else you would like to cover before a wrap up?
Well, once again, just very happy to have this great crowd today. Thank you for your great questions. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you didn't find me speaking too quickly because I just want to make sure that I could kind of really put through some important messages. And I would say nowadays, it's a tough time for everyone. And as a leader, it is more important than ever to be really a good storyteller. And I just want to kind of remind that one more thing. Why we want to become a good storyteller is not because we want to impress people. It's not about our presentation skills. It's all about because we want to make an influence and make an impact. And now you understand it is, again, putting the right context, putting the right content in the right sequence to create the value of the message to create that impact eventually. Okay, so hope this is going to be helpful just to kind of raise your morale within the team or even strive for more resources to do the great work that you guys are doing. And of course, finally, stay safe, take care, and I hope you enjoy the coming up weekend. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. So this is the end of our webinar. after we finish today, please fill out the survey below or select the continue on Zoom page in your browser. So there will be survey about your satisfaction about this webinar. So thank you again. We will see you next time. Goodbye and thank you.
Okay, goodbye. Have a good day. Thank you.